October 1943. Naples, Italy. The small group of young women huddled in the back room of the requisitioned villa could hear American boots on the marble floors. Maria, barely 19, whispered to Sophia beside her, "They'll make us strip." The Germans said Americans treat women worse than animals. Her hands trembled as she clutched the thin cotton robe around her shoulders, the only dignity remaining after 2 years serving as a comfort girl for Axis officers. Across the city that autumn, approximately 1,800 Italian women awaited similar fates, their bodies commodified by war, their futures determined by victors they'd been taught to fear. The harsh afternoon light sliced through damaged shutters as Captain Robert Guthrie of the Army Medical Corps pushed open the door. The room's acrid scent, unwashed bodies, cheap perfume, lingering cigarette smoke, told a story that military intelligence had already documented: forced prostitution under systematic management. His expression remained neutral, masking both compassion and anger as he surveyed the scene. 23 women, most between 16 and 25, cowered against the wall. Their malnourishment was evident: protruding collarbones, hollow cheeks, the average weight approximately 40 pounds below healthy standards for women their age. "Tell them we won't resist," an older woman named Francesca murmured in broken German, assuming Americans wouldn't understand Italian. "Tell them we'll do whatever they want." Instead of demanding services, Captain Guthrie turned and called down the hallway. "Rodriguez, bring in those medical kits and ration boxes. And get those blankets from the truck." The women exchanged confused glances. According to Nazi propaganda, Americans were supposed to be brutal, demanding immediate gratification. The fascist newspapers had published lurid stories of American soldiers' treatment of women in Sicily just months earlier, fabricated atrocities designed to terrify the population. Each woman had mentally prepared herself for a new form of the same exploitation they'd endured under German officers who had paid 15 Reichsmarks for 30 minutes of their bodies. When Corporal Rodriguez entered with armfuls of olive-drab blankets instead of leering at exposed skin, Maria began crying, the first of many unexpected tears that day. As the 36th Texas Infantry Division secured Naples that October, they encountered approximately 25,000 civilians living in desperate conditions. The retreating Germans had destroyed aqueducts, electrical infrastructure, and food storage facilities. The city's official hunger rate exceeded 93% by Allied medical assessments. But among Naples' suffering populace, these women represented a particularly brutal exploitation. Their bodies traded for survival in a system that began under fascist management and intensified during German occupation. The American Liberation Forces, primarily the 36th Division, supported by specialized medical units, including the 16th Field Hospital, arrived with unexpected protocols. Military intelligence had identified at least 11 Case Mondo, organized brothels, throughout Naples, containing approximately 1,800 women. Colonel William Darby had established clear orders regarding these facilities. These women are to be treated as victims of war, not as enemy collaborators or as available entertainment. Medical attention, nutrition, and dignified treatment are priorities. Within hours, the villa where Maria and others waited became the first processing center. Women received medical examinations at their consent, conducted by female nurses where possible. Each received 2,000 calories of rations daily, nearly double what most Neapolitans accessed that month. Most significantly, they received respect, a resource more scarce than food after years of degradation. Captain Guthrie's unit distributed 347 sets of clean clothing that first week, simple cotton dresses and underwear from Red Cross supplies. These weren't payment for services. They were basic humanitarian aid. The women couldn't comprehend this distinction initially. After receiving a plain blue dress, Sophia asked hesitantly, "What must I do for this?" The American nurse's reply, "Nothing, it's yours," caused the first breakdown that observers would document repeatedly across liberated Italy. As night fell across Naples, Maria wrapped herself in an army-issued blanket, confused by Americans who offered food without demands. The sound of her sobbing joined others in the converted dormitory, not from fear or pain, but from the disorienting experience of unexpected dignity. Within 72 hours of discovering the first case Mondo in Naples, the U.S. Army Medical Corps mobilized a systematic response unlike anything these women had experienced. Colonel Harold Deal, Chief Medical Officer for the region, requisitioned supplies typically reserved for field hospitals, 7,800 doses of penicillin, 12,000 multivitamin tablets, 2,300 feminine hygiene kits, and 4,750 individual clothing packages. The speed and scale of this allocation revealed priorities fundamentally different from those of retreating forces. While German officers had documented these women in ledgers with prices and specialties noted, American military records classified them with a different designation. Civilian war victims, Category D, the same classification given to survivors of concentration camps. Lieutenant Sarah McCarthy, one of 14 female nurses assigned to the rehabilitation program, documented the women's initial mistrust. "They wait for the moment we demand payment in services," she wrote in her November 1943 report. "When this moment doesn't come, their psychological defense mechanisms begin to crack." Medical records show that 73% of the women processed through the Naples facilities experienced emotional breakdowns during the first week, not from mistreatment, but from its absence. The contrast between anticipated humiliation and actual treatment manifested physically. Women who entered American care in October 1943 gained an average of 11.3 pounds by December. Blood tests showed hemoglobin levels rising from dangerously low measurements, average 8.4 GDL, to approaching normal ranges, 11.2 GDL, after 6 weeks of standard military rations. More telling than medical statistics were behavioral changes. Eye contact became possible, shoulders straightened, voices strengthened. Military police established security protocols unlike those previously governing these facilities. Rather than guarding entrances to prevent escapes, American MPs maintained perimeters that kept potential exploiters out. Captain James Williamson's standing orders remained in military archives. Any personnel attempting to solicit services from these women will face immediate court-martial under Article 96. During the first month of liberation, 14 American soldiers were disciplined for violations, a public demonstration that exploitation would not be tolerated, even of women previously forced into prostitution. The American Red Cross, arriving in Naples by November 1943, expanded support beyond military capabilities. Elizabeth Richardson, Regional Director, documented allocating 23,000 lire, approximately 230, weekly for specialized food supplements, fresh eggs, citrus, and olive oil, nutrients specifically addressing deficiencies common among the women. "These aren't luxury items," Richardson noted in her correspondence to Washington, "but medical necessities for bodies recovering from systematic starvation." The Red Cross established a rotating schedule of 27 volunteers who provided non-medical support, language lessons, basic literacy classes, and crucial human connection without exploitation. What began as emergency intervention evolved into structured rehabilitation by December 1943. Military documentation shows the establishment of 3 dedicated facilities in Naples, each housing approximately 200 women. These centers, converted from abandoned schools and one former fascist administrative building, operated with standardized protocols: medical care, nutritional rehabilitation, psychological support, educational opportunities, and vocational training. Army engineers installed working plumbing, providing many women with their first experience of hot water in years. Simple privacy measures, curtains between beds, doors on bathroom stalls, represented respect previously unimaginable. Italian women who spoke English began training as translators and program assistants, receiving 140 lire daily, equivalent to skilled civilian work. Rosa Benvenuto, previously forced to service 20 German officers weekly, became the first Italian program coordinator at the Via Roma facility. Her first paycheck, earned through dignified work rather than exploitation, caused her to collapse in tears. The American officer who found her sobbing on the floor initially misunderstood until she explained through broken English. These are first tears of joy in 3 years. By Christmas 1943, the program expanded to accommodate 1,750 women. The systematic approach transformed individual trauma into collective recovery. Lieutenant General Mark Clark, visiting a facility in December, remarked in his personal journal, "What distinguishes civilization from barbarism isn't wealth or power, but how the vulnerable are treated. Today, I saw American values in action more clearly than on any battlefield." Maria Conti stood before a mirror in January 1944, barely recognizing herself. 3 months earlier, she had weighed 83 pounds, her collarbones sharp enough to cast shadows. Now, at 112 pounds, her face had softened, cheeks filling with healthy color. The simple blue dress she wore, one of 2 she owned, hadn't been payment for services, but a gift without conditions. When she touched the cotton fabric, she still remembered asking, "What must I do for this?" And the American nurse's incomprehensible answer, "Nothing. It's yours." The rehabilitation center on Via Tribunali housed 167 women by early 1944. Each woman's story followed similar patterns: coercion, starvation, exploitation. Yet their recoveries progressed at different rates. 18-year-old Sophia, who had been forced into service at 15, still flinched when men spoke loudly. Meanwhile, 32-year-old Luisa had progressed to assisting with English classes, her previous education before the war making her valuable as a teaching assistant. American aid workers documented these transformations meticulously. Case files show that women in the program gained an average of 22 pounds during their first 4 months. Blood tests revealed vitamin deficiencies resolving, with 84% showing normal values by March 1944. Beyond physical recovery, psychological changes proved more profound. Lieutenant Jessica Hawkins, a psychiatric nurse, recorded, "The moment of transformation typically arrives not during therapy sessions, but during ordinary activities. Receiving a second helping of food without having to perform services, being addressed by name rather than number, or being asked for their opinions on program improvements." For Gabriella Ricci, this moment came during a voluntary literacy class. After successfully reading her first complete sentence, the 20-year-old broke down sobbing. The American instructor initially thought she'd made a mistake until Gabriella explained through a translator. "For 3 years, I was told I was worth nothing except for my body. Now, you teach me to read as if I have a future." The educational opportunities expanded rapidly. Military records show that by February 1944, the Naples rehabilitation centers offered daily classes in basic literacy, Italian and English, mathematics, home economics, office skills, and textile work. Attendance remained voluntary, a critical distinction from the forced participation these women had endured previously. Remarkably, attendance records show 91% participation despite classes being optional. Captain Thomas Mitchell, normally assigned to engineering duties, volunteered 3 evenings weekly to teach basic mathematics. In his personal letters home, he wrote, "These women approach multiplication tables with more courage than I've seen from soldiers entering battle. They've been told for years that their minds don't matter. Watching them discover otherwise is more rewarding than any military victory." The vocational training programs began in March 1944, offering skills that provided genuine independence. Women learned dressmaking, clerical work, food preparation, and basic nursing assistance. Each skill represented economic freedom, the ability to support themselves without exploitation. Training rooms contained equipment that many had never used: 15 Singer sewing machines, 8 typewriters, industrial kitchen tools, and medical training aids. Francesca Lombardi, who had spent 3 years in forced prostitution, completed typing certification in April 1944, achieving 35 words per minute. Her first job placement with the Allied Civilian Administration paid 1,200 lire monthly, more than 6 times what German officers had paid to exploit her body for an hour. After receiving her first paycheck, she purchased a silver cross necklace, the first possession she'd selected for herself since 1941. The physical transformation of these women by mid-1944 startled even the program administrators. Photographs in military archives show the progression. Hollow-eyed, hunched figures in October 1943. Healthier, more confident women by spring. Daily caloric intake had increased from approximately 800 calories under German control to 2,100 calories in American care. Basic hygienic practices previously denied, daily showers, dental care, feminine products, became routine rather than luxuries. Teresa Bianchi, who had been told she was less valuable than rats by a German officer, wrote in her journal, recently discovered in Naples archives, "Today, an American doctor asked what I want for my future. No one has asked what I wanted since before the war. I couldn't answer because I was crying too hard. Not from sadness, but because someone thought I deserved a future at all." As Allied forces pushed northward through Italy in spring 1944, the rehabilitation model developed in Naples expanded across liberated territories. Military records document systematic implementation in Rome, June 1944, Florence, August 1944, and Bologna, April 1945, with each city's program adapted to local conditions. The Fifth Army's dedicated rehabilitation units grew from the initial 37 personnel in Naples to 216 staff members across Italy by late 1944, supported by 189 Italian civilian employees, many of them former program participants. The Rome implementation revealed the program's evolution. Within 72 hours of liberating the Eternal City, American forces identified 7 Case Mondo, containing approximately 430 women. Unlike the improvised response in Naples months earlier, the Rome operation deployed with standardized protocols. Medical teams arrived with pre-packaged supply kits containing 2,600 calories of rations per woman, medical examination equipment, clothing packages, and educational materials translated into regional Italian dialects. Captain Eleanor Standish, medical liaison officer, documented the contrast between Vatican City's opulence and the squalor of Roman comfort houses. These women were held less than 1.2 miles from St. Peter's Basilica, yet they existed in medieval conditions: no running water, infested mattresses, and malnutrition so severe that 37% require immediate hospitalization. The Roman facilities presented unique challenges: underground locations with limited ventilation, severe tuberculosis outbreaks, and higher rates of untreated infections than Naples. Military medical units allocated 23% more antibiotics per capita than in southern operations. Rehabilitation statistics tracked measurable outcomes across regions. By December 1944, program administrators documented 4,171 women processed nationwide, with regional variations in recovery metrics. Northern facilities reported slower psychological recovery rates, averaged 27 days longer, but faster educational advancement than southern counterparts. Florence participants achieved literacy milestones 14 days faster on average than Naples groups, reflecting regional educational differences that predated fascist control. Local resistance to rehabilitation efforts emerged in several regions, particularly from church authorities and remaining fascist sympathizers. In Siena, Cardinal Bettini initially refused access to church-owned buildings requisitioned for rehabilitation centers, declaring the women morally unredeemable. Colonel James Harrison's diplomatic correspondence reveals the resolution. "I explained to His Eminence that these women are victims, not criminals, and that American policy makes no moral judgments about those who suffered under occupation." The buildings were made available the following morning. The stark contrast between German fascist policies and American approaches manifested in official documentation. German military records recovered in Bologna revealed an accounting system assigning monetary values to each woman, ranging from 75 to 450 Reichsmarks, with depreciation schedules based on age and condition. American intake forms instead documented educational background, vocational interests, and family connections to facilitate eventual reintegration into civilian society. This fundamental difference, women as commodities versus women as citizens, represented the ideological chasm between occupiers and liberators. By spring 1945, standardized rehabilitation protocols had evolved significantly from the improvised Naples model. Program directors established a 120-day rehabilitation cycle with 4 distinct phases: medical stabilization, 14 days, psychological counseling, 30 days, educational assessment, 21 days, and vocational preparation, 55 days. Each woman received individualized progression timelines based on medical and psychological evaluations. Statistical analysis from military archives shows that 84% of participants completed all 4 phases, with 71% securing employment or educational placement upon program completion. Italian medical professionals and social workers integrated increasingly into program administration. Dr. Giovanna Martelli, formerly of the University of Rome's medical faculty, joined the Florence Rehabilitation Center in September 1944, eventually supervising all medical operations in Tuscany. Her integration represented a deliberate strategy of transferring program control to Italian authorities. By December 1944, 63% of direct service providers were Italians, many trained through American crash courses in trauma-informed care. The quantifiable outcomes appeared in military reports: 76% reduction in communicable disease rates, 22-pound average weight gain, 89% literacy achievement, and 74% employment placement success. Behind these statistics lay immeasurable psychological transformations. Lieutenant Michael Peterson captured this unmeasured impact in his field report from Bologna. The day a woman laughs spontaneously for the first time is recorded by staff as more significant than any medical milestone. These moments, multiplied across thousands, represent victory more profound than territorial gains. As Italy emerged from war's shadow in summer 1945, the rehabilitation programs transitioned from military administration to civilian oversight. The handover proceeded methodically. Facilities in Naples transferred to Italian control in June, Rome in August, and northern centers by December. American forces provided transitional funding through the Foreign Economic Administration, allocating $1.7 million for continued operations through 1946, approximately $860 per woman in ongoing support. This investment represented not charity, but strategic nation-building through human recovery. Maria Conti, who had entered American care as a trembling comfort girl in October 1943, now stood before 37 new program participants in Milan as a paid staff member. At 21, she had completed the program, obtained secretarial certification, and returned as a peer counselor, earning 2,100 lire monthly. "I was where you are," she told the women, her voice steady. "The Americans didn't save us, they gave us tools to save ourselves." Her transformation from exploitation to empowerment exemplified the program's fundamental philosophy. The American Friends Service Committee, arriving in Italy in late 1945, expanded educational opportunities beyond immediate vocational needs. Their scholarship initiative, funded through private American donations, supported 213 former comfort women in advanced education by 1947. Sophia Ricci, once exploited by German officers at 15, entered the University of Naples Medical School at 20, her tuition, books, and living expenses covered by Pennsylvania Quakers who had never met her. The $420 annual scholarship represented the largest financial contribution most Italian families had ever received. Long-term statistical tracking revealed outcomes that surpassed even optimistic projections. A 1950 follow-up study conducted by Johns Hopkins University researchers located 2,141 program graduates, finding 83% self-sufficient through employment, 7% pursuing higher education, and 9% supported through stable marriages. Only 1% had returned to prostitution, a figure dramatically lower than post-war outcomes for exploited women in other European regions where rehabilitation programs didn't exist. The average annual income among program graduates reached 287,000 lire by 1950, approximately equal to skilled male workers, an unprecedented economic equality in post-war Italy. Personal relationships formed during rehabilitation created unexpected bridges between nations. By 1947, American military records documented 311 marriages between rehabilitation program participants and American personnel. These relationships required extensive review, as military policy initially discouraged such unions. Captain Thomas Mitchell, who had volunteered teaching mathematics in Naples, married former program participant Francesca Lombardi in August 1946 after receiving special permission from military authorities. Their correspondence, preserved in family archives, reveals the genuine transformation. "You never saw me as damaged goods," Francesca wrote. "You saw me as I might have been without the war." And somehow, that vision became real. The program's approach influenced emerging Italian social services. Dr. Elena Vassallo, who trained under American medical personnel in Florence, established Italy's first trauma recovery center for women in Milan in 1948, implementing methodologies directly adapted from rehabilitation protocols. Her clinic's founding documents explicitly credited the American model of dignified recovery as its inspiration. By 1955, 17 similar centers operated throughout Italy, all led by women who had either participated in or observed the American rehabilitation programs. Women who completed the program frequently returned as staff, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of recovery and leadership. By 1950, former participants held 73% of administrative positions in continuing rehabilitation programs. Teresa Bianchi, once told she was less valuable than rats, became executive director of women's rehabilitation services for the Lombardy region in 1952, overseeing programs serving 1,700 women annually. Her department received government funding of 14.7 million lire yearly, official recognition of rehabilitation's value. A 1955 interview with Gabriella Ricci, who had sobbed upon reading her first sentence in 1944, revealed the generational impact. "My daughter starts university next year," she explained, displaying a photograph of a young woman in graduation attire. "She cannot imagine a world where I was considered nothing but a body for men's use. The Americans didn't just change my life, they changed what my child believes possible." This transformation of expectations, multiplied across thousands of families, represented the program's deepest impact. When Italian President Luigi Einaudi presented civilian service medals to 5 American program administrators in 1953, he acknowledged their contribution's magnitude. "Some rebuilt our bridges and buildings. You rebuilt our women's souls, a foundation without which Italy could never truly recover." Naples, 1975. Maria Conti Esposito adjusted her reading glasses as she addressed the International Women's Rights Conference. At 53, her elegant posture and confident voice betrayed no hint of her past as a trembling comfort girl. As Director of Social Services for the Campania region, she oversaw programs helping 23,000 women annually with a budget of 475 million lire. Italian social welfare emerged from the ashes of exploitation, she explained to delegates from 47 nations. What Americans demonstrated in 1943, that compassion could replace degradation, became the foundation of our modern approach. The rehabilitation program's influence extended far beyond direct participants. A 1972 University of Rome study traced the impact through 3 decades of Italian social policy, identifying 17 distinct legislative initiatives between 1948 and 1970 that incorporated rehabilitation methodologies. The 1961 Social Protection Act, establishing Italy's first comprehensive system addressing domestic violence, directly quoted language from American military rehabilitation protocols developed for comfort women. This legislative legacy transformed temporary humanitarian intervention into permanent social infrastructure. Longitudinal research published in the American Journal of Public Health in 1967 located 1,741 program participants and their 3,922 children, documenting intergenerational outcomes that defied statistical predictions. Children of rehabilitation program graduates demonstrated 37% higher educational attainment than demographic peers, 42% higher income levels, and 28% lower incidence of domestic violence. These findings suggested that healing exploitation's wounds created ripple effects spanning generations. Program participants had not merely recovered themselves, they had redirected their family trajectories. The Italian women's rights movement drew direct inspiration from rehabilitation experiences. Sophia, who entered American care at 18 in 1943, became a founding member of the Italian Women's Liberation Front in 1970. At a Milan rally attended by 15,000 women, she directly connected her advocacy to American intervention. "I learned from Americans that a woman's value isn't determined by men's desires." This revelation wasn't just personal healing, it was political awakening. Her organization successfully advocated for 7 major legislative reforms, expanding women's legal protections between 1970 and 1978. American military doctrine formally incorporated lessons from the Italian rehabilitation program. The 1952 Field Manual FM 27-5, Civil Affairs Military Government, contained an entire chapter on rehabilitation of exploited populations that drew directly from Italian experiences. When American forces entered Korea in 1950, they implemented protocols developed in Naples to address similar exploitation situations. Lieutenant Colonel James Williamson, who had overseen security for the original Naples facilities, later directed comparable programs during the Vietnam conflict, establishing 7 rehabilitation centers for exploited women between 1967 and 1970. Reunions between program participants and American personnel occurred periodically through the decades. In 1983, Teresa Bianchi traveled to Minneapolis to attend the funeral of Captain Eleanor Standish, the medical officer who had first treated her in Rome. Her eulogy, delivered in fluent English, reflected 4 decades of perspective. She didn't see a ruined woman. She saw a human being temporarily broken. That vision gave me permission to see myself the same way. Such connections, maintained across oceans and decades, demonstrated relationships transcending typical military-civilian interactions. Academic recognition of the program's historical significance emerged slowly. Harvard University's 1992 comprehensive study, Humanitarian Intervention in Military Contexts, devoted 87 pages to analyzing the Italian rehabilitation program, concluding, "This represents perhaps the most successful integration of humanitarian principles within military operations in modern history, achieving transformational outcomes with minimal resources during active conflict." The study noted that the entire program's cost, approximately $4.2 million from 1943-1947, represented less than the price of 2 B-17 bombers, yet its human impact exceeded many major military operations. When Maria Conti Esposito received Italy's highest civilian honor in 1990, her acceptance speech distilled a lifetime's perspective. "I was 18 when Americans found me, expecting to be stripped of remaining dignity. Instead, they clothed me, not just with fabric, but with respect." This revelation wasn't just personal, it became Italy's social conscience. Now 76, she concluded, "Many nations measure power through destruction capacity. In October 1943, I discovered America's true strength. The ability to restore what war destroys, human dignity. The transformation of comfort girls, from exploited commodities to respected citizens, represented not just individual healing, but profound social reconstruction. What began as frightened women whispering, "They'll make us strip," evolved into a testament that genuine strength manifests not through domination, but restoration. In the legacy of these women, once expected to serve as conquerors, yet instead empowered to rebuild their nation, lies perhaps the most meaningful victory of the Italian campaign, proving that compassion achieves what cruelty never could.